Hey, I'm Stephan with Papadakis Racing. We're here at our race shop in Carson, California, where we just got back from the first event with this GR86 drift car. I want to show you guys the process to where we stripped the car down, modified it to competition spec, got on the dyno, tested it and everything in under 8 weeks. Let's get started. We started this project with a brand new 2022 Toyota GR86 that had 7 miles on it. I got asked a few times, and over the years I've been asked this, like, why do we keep starting with brand new cars that we have to strip all this stuff out? Why don't we just start with a body in white, like just a bare chassis, and then build up from there? Well, a couple of reasons. One is the chassis aren't available. They're only available in full cars. I've never seen Toyota really make these cars available as just a chassis. Plus, there's a lot of small parts that we need, especially initially when we build the car, that we just can't get from the parts department. So we start with new cars. The engine we're using is the inline 3-liter 6-cylinder out of the GR Supra. Installation is threading a needle. We want to get it as far back as we can for good weight distribution, but not too close to the firewall to where we can't work on it. Also, we need good ground clearance and hopefully fit everything under the hood. No one had done the swap before, so there was a lot of test fitting to make sure that it fit where we wanted it to. The way we did the engine mounts was plates that were bolted to the block and this tubular cradle that goes underneath, and a couple of brackets that go up to those plates. The inside of the car had to be cut up a bit in order to fit the racing transmission, and we later covered that up with some new sheet metal that was welded into place. The roll cage is all CAD designed, so computer designed, CNC bent and laser cut. It showed up to us already bent, already notched, and it fits together like a puzzle, much easier than the old way of having to manually bend it and hand tube notch everything. There is one challenge though with these unibody cars. When you want to weld all of the roll cage in, you have a problem where the roof is in the way and you can't get the welder up to the top of the roll cage. So there's a couple ways you can do it. One, you can cut the roof off so you can weld the entire cage, but that's not that practical. So we found the best way to do it is you actually put holes in the chassis so you can lower the cage once it's mostly welded, weld the top of the cage, and then you bring the cage back up. And in the back, there's plates that go under the tubes, and in the front, these boxes that act as a big support for the cage, but also allow it to have that space for when you lower it. For the 6-point safety harness for the driver, we make these steel plates that weld to the unibody with eyelets that the harness connects to. The brakes in this car have a traditional front brake and then 2 calipers on the rear. One of the calipers is activated when you push the foot brake, and the second set of rear calipers are activated when you pull the handbrake. And the reason we do that is so when you hit the foot brake and the handbrake at the same time, they don't crosstalk. And it's a much better feel for the driver having that dual caliper setup. Probably one of my favorite parts of the car is the way the nitrous bottle is changed in it. Aldo opened up the rear quarter glass so it was large enough to fit the bottle. We built this Lexan window that has these quick disconnect clips on it. You then disconnect the lines, unscrew the bracket, and you can take the bottle right through the quarter glass. And you can change it probably like 2 minutes once you practice. The rear end in the car is a Winter's quick change. These rear ends are really strong. They use a spool type differential, so no differential. And they have this drop gear inside of them. So power comes in from the drive shaft. It then comes up through the drop gear, which is easily changed at the racetrack, and you can have all different kinds of gear ratios for it by just taking off the back cover and swapping these 2 gears. It takes under 5 minutes. The power then comes out of the differential through the axles and then turns the hubs and the tires. The radiator for the engine is now mounted in the middle of the car. We do that for a couple of reasons. One is to get a little bit more rear weight bias, more weight over the rear tires, but also to have less cooling stuff stacked in front of each other, because we have the intercooler that cools the intake charge in the front of the car. And when you stack that with the radiator, they can both suffer. So we found that putting the radiator in the rear solves a few problems, like better cooling, better weight distribution, and also if the car gets into some fender benders with other cars and other crashes, it's moved to the center of the car, so it's harder to have damage to the radiator. The original rear glass bar that we mocked up was flat, and I didn't really like it. And I asked Dominic, I was like, hey man, can you make it curved somehow? And then 5 minutes later, I found out he's already cut a piece of wood in order to shape the piece of metal with a nice arc that matched the roof line. It seemed like a much more natural arc than a straight piece in the back. It looked really good. The rear window is Lexan. In order to get the screws for the window into this square tubing, we use these products called a nutsert. And it works like a rivet, but it has threads inside of it. So you drill a pre-hole, you then install the nutsert onto the nutsert gun, You slide that into the hole, and then when you pull the handle, it smashes it, and the knurl, that little feature like ribs, holds on to the metal really tight, and it works just like a nut. And we've used these nut certs for years. They work really well for areas where you can't get to the backside and put an actual nut on it. Most of the rear of the car gets cut off, and we build the subframe. And we want to make this area of the car extremely strong because it holds the fuel cell. And we have these laser cut brackets that hold the cell in. The housing for the cell is all aluminum, but inside is a really strong bladder. So it could actually take a hit and still be safe and keep all of the fuel inside, keeping everybody safe. Because of the tight time frame we had to build the car, we really had to do everything at the shop and everything really quickly, including painting of the car. So once we had all of the fabrication, welding and stuff done to the chassis, it was time to paint it. We didn't want to paint the outside of the body, so we masked and put plastic wrap over those areas. And all the places inside the car that we wanted to paint, we spent a lot of time prepping, making sure it was really clean so the paint would stick well. Our buddy Kuzi came by, who had a portable paint booth. It was a little bit small for the car, but we were able to get it set up in a way that we used 20 cans of spray paint. The Steal It stuff worked out really well, and just spray painted the whole car. I'd say that it's almost as good as the powder coat that we've been using in the past, but we were able to do this at our shop really quickly, and it was pretty efficient. Like within half a day, we were able to get the car painted. The amount of paint that comes out per spray and the way it covered everything, I don't know. I think we might do the next cars like this. No, I don't know about that. The body kit is from a company called Rocket Bunny in Japan, and this was one of the first kits that came over to the US. Once we got it over here, we made sure everything fit, and we started doing the installation. The installation is relatively straightforward, where we rivet it to the factory body. And in order to do the mock-up, what we do is we drill holes, and we use these things called clecos. And this is something that's in aerospace that they use for mock-ups before you actually go and rivet something. And the clecos are great because you can take the panels on and off, and then once you're finally ready for the installation, you can go ahead and rivet it. The turbo system, there was no off-the-shelf parts available, so we had to fabricate it ourselves. We got a couple of flanges, one that goes to the cylinder head and one goes to the turbocharger, and then CAD designed the turbo tubes and everything and had those 3D printed out of Inconel, which is a high nickel alloy metal. We found that that was actually a much quicker and efficient way of doing this versus fabricating it with a bunch of small pieces. We could, design it in the computer, 3D print it out of plastic, make sure that fits, and then have it 3D printed out of Inconel. And then the assembly and welding procedure is relatively straightforward. We fit everything up like a puzzle, then tack weld it, and then weld the entire header together. The intercooler is mounted on these blue rubber bushings, and we 3D printed those in the shop as well. So I just CAD designed it in SolidWorks and then 3D printed it out of TPU material. It's sort of a soft material. We found it to work really well, and then we can have bushings of our own design made same day. All of the wiring has been redone with what we call mil spec. So basically military or aircraft specification wire and pins and the heat shrink and everything. And our buddy Greg does all of the wiring in the car at a very high reliable level. The handbrake is one of our own designs. It's an aluminum handbrake that goes along this black rod to a separate master cylinder. We found that if we make our own setup within the car, the packaging is a lot nicer, and then we can fit the seat and design the whole setup around the driver. This is the rear fuel cell, all finished up with red anodized, and the lines including the AEM fuel filter. This small tank with the little filter on it is the vent for the rear end, and the clear tank next to that is the overflow for the cooling system. Now you can see with the radiator mounted on our little air dam, the inlet for the radiator, and the way the air gets out is it just goes underneath the car because it's all open and we didn't close anything out beneath the radiator and the fuel cell. So air can come in from the top, through the radiator, through the fans, and then down underneath the car and then out. The air filter is tucked down there behind the intercooler. There wasn't a whole bunch of room, but we felt like that was a pretty good area to get some reasonably cool air. And then you can see the black power steering cooler on top of the intercooler. The red tank is the power steering fluid reservoir, and the blue solenoid is for the nitrous. We also have a vent for the engine, and the crankcase vent comes out of this line over to this red tank that Dom made with a filter. We did have one problem where the fuel rail was interfering with the hood clearance. So we did a couple of things. We actually machined and modified the fuel rail so it was lower profile, and then made the hood bump out a little bit in order to have some clearance. Once the car was all wrapped and everything, you really couldn't tell. But sometimes when you have an engine that never belongs in the car, then you have to make some mods like this. Finally, with the whole system done, wiring and everything, we were able to get the first start. Once we got the car mostly finished, we were able to get it to the dyno, make sure that the engine and everything is tuned properly, and then get out to the track where we can do a test day, and then finally out to the competition. All right, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. If you have any comments, then put them in the comment section. See you in the next video. Thank you.
Here we go, GOLD Gold. That's what we're talking about with Fredric Aasbo chasing down Jonathan Castro. Castro comes out there, gets all the way out, dialing it in. Look at that, Aasbo comes up a bit short there. Castro with massive angle. Fredric Aasbo going against his Toyota GR teammate. I'll tell you what, Castro is absolutely flexing on him. DR style right there.
Castro comes in sideways.
He's just like, come on, he's chomping at the bit. He is slobbering.